Ladies and gentlemen, friends and divers, welcome to this very first in a series of exciting presentations on topics related to decompression theory and diving safety, whereby I offer you a treasure chest of handy dive tips and general knowledge aimed at helping bring more enjoyment to your diving and helping you stay safe in the water. Today's video presentation is about one of my favorite topics related to decompression theory, ascent rates and safety stops. According to the latest DAN 2019 annual diving report, there were 2,423 acute decompression illness cases for the 4 years 2014 through 2017, of which around roughly half were painful joint and skin bends, almost certainly I'd expect triggered by rapid ascents, and the other half were the more serious neurological bends, i.e. bubbles in the spinal cord and brain, more typical from long dive durations, pushing hypothetical no decompression time limits and the resultant tissue supersaturation. Hyperbaric facilities report that some 80% of bends occur to divers who are completely within their maximum allowed no decompression limits, so something is certainly at play that is causing divers to bend anyway, despite our computer algorithms trying to keep us safe. Whilst there may certainly be multitudes of factors involved in this, ascent rates and safety stops are certainly two of the main players and the ones we are exploring in this short educational presentation. Central to keeping safe in the water is an awareness and an acceptance that dive computers are programmed with a plethora of different decompression algorithms based on varying concepts of decompression theory that do not all give the same maximum no decompression limit bottom times. Some dive computers are knowingly very conservative and some absolutely aren't. They all, of course, have variable settings that permit us to also define our own risk profiles, but none of them know the first thing about our hydration status, our weight, our age, our level of fitness, etc. What almost all of these varying algorithms have in common, however, when calculating your no decompression time limit on dives, is an assumption that you will not exceed an ascent rate of around 9 or 10 meters per minute at the end of your dive. It is now commonly known and accepted in diving medicine that all dives result in the formation of what are known as microscopic silent bubbles. There is no such thing as a bubble-free dive. At the end of every dive, your blood and tissues fizz with these microbubbles, but the number of these and the size of them are heavily influenced by the speed at which you ascend and how long you spend on your safety stop. These microscopic bubbles remain relatively harmless unless you do anything to cause too many of them or them to grow too big, cluster, and then stick somewhere. It is also the extent and size of these silent bubbles that cause the post-dive fatigue we can commonly all feel. Decompression theory algorithms are primarily all focused on trying to limit the formation and size of these microscopic bubbles so that we hopefully do not get a bend. In a research study published many years ago, divers' microbubble loads were measured via Doppler ultrasound devices, the results of which we can see on this graph. The red curve represents the microbubble development following an ascent directly to the surface by divers without doing any safety stops and ascending pretty fast at 18 meters per minute. The green-colored curve represents the microbubble tissue loading for divers who were asked to include a 2-minute safety stop, and the blue-colored curve represents the microbubble tissue loading for divers who were asked to include 5 minutes of safety stops. Adding the 2-minute safety stop to the ascent was in effect equivalent to halving the ascent rate and substantially minimizing microscopic bubble growth, which would put the dive in line with the 9 meters per minute ascent rate now recommended for sports divers by the Undersea and Hyperbaric Medical Society and all recreational dive training associations. The speed of ascent also has a major effect on the size of bubbles generated. In this graph, you can see the connection between bubble size and ascent rate in two different tissue types. Fast ascents may also cause sufficient microbubbles to clog the lungs, limiting gas exchange and causing nitrogen-laden venous blood to be returned into the arterial circulation in what is known as an intrapulmonary right-to-left shunt. These silent bubbles may persist in the lungs for between 2 to 3 hours before diffusing out and allowing gas exchange to return to normal. It is an interesting observation that there is absolutely no scientific or medical reason for our traditional 3-minute safety stops. Diving physicians just knew that slowing our ascent rates and including a safety stop was critical for our safety and in limiting the risk of acute decompression illness. They didn't believe that the diving community would take up a recommendation for 5-minute safety stops, but they knew that merely a minute just wasn't long enough. And so they settled on encouraging us to try include the 3-minute safety stop at the end of every dive, which is indeed now thankfully pretty commonplace. And yet, if you look back at the graph that shows the reduction in bubble generation that can be brought about with a 5-minute stop, you would be well stuck to defend why you're not doing one. It stands to reason that the greatest rate of change of pressure, and thus the greatest risk for the formation of bubbles, occurs the closer we get to the surface. Some of the newest dive computers now include for variable ascent rates from around 9 meters per minute when ascending from depth to as slow as just 3 meters per minute as you ascend from your safety stop to the surface, as they try and limit this microbubble formation. It should generally take you at least a full minute or more to ascend from your safety stop to the surface, this being the most dangerous space for bubble formation. If there's any one thing that I can strongly try and encourage you to incorporate into your diving, it would be the practice of starting to consciously time your ascents so that you can control and slow your ascent rate and the resultant formation of microbubbles that can cause post-dive fatigue and the risk of acute decompression illness. Remember that the extreme fatigue is one of the signs and symptoms of acute decompression illness. So the more exhausted you are after a dive, the more microbubbles you likely have coursing through your body. If you are diving, for example, at say 15 meters depth, it should take you a full minute to ascend slowly to your safety stop at 5 meters. You should ideally hang there for a full 5 minutes, and then it should take you at least a full minute again to ascend from the 5-meter stop to the surface. So why not give that a try next time you're out diving and see if you feel any fresher after your dive. The ocean is a magical place that can forever invigorate your soul once you let it in. As we're heading for the weekend, I hope you have all got some awesome dives planned somewhere spectacular and are as excited as I am to get underwater to blow some bubbles. Have fun out there, but stay safe. Happy weekend, everybody. Another beautiful day in Africa. Oh my word, just look at that sea. 9-mile reef at Sodwana Bay. Woohoo! It's good to be alive.